Welcome to the Solid Verbal. And now, Dan and Ty.
Dan Rubenstein, welcome back. Still preview season. We got a long way to go.
Yes, sir.
My friend, we've already got, I guess, technically two episodes in the books. Go back and listen to our first, I guess, conference preview episode. On the last one, we did the Sun Belt. I talked way too long about the Sun Belt. I'm still really interested. Really interested in the Sun Belt.
It's not that you spoke too long. It's that in the spirit of college, everybody sat down for Sun Belt 301 in the lecture hall, and you really gave it to them.
I'm Sun Belt Billy now. I think I've assumed that identity.
Yeah.
Based on all the research. Anyway, listen, go back and listen to that. It was the Sun Belt. It was the American. Dan talked about the MAC. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the Mountain West. We're going to talk about Conference USA. We're going to talk about the Pac-2. Pac-2 for now, Pac-12 for later, but appreciate everybody stopping on by. Hit follow, hit subscribe so that you don't miss any of our episodes. And, of course, verballers.com, verballers.com. That's our Patreon. Go there for the bonus perks. You get bonus content. You get ad-free episodes. You get episodes a little bit early. Access to our Discord, which is starting to heat up. More and more people are starting to find the Patreon, starting to get ready for college football season.
Yes.
As the calendar has turned to July, Dan. So,
yeah.
With all that said, I let us off last time around talking about the Sun Belt. We do have some sounds here. We are going to continue, I believe, using our Lorenzo Lamas flaw finder. Of
course.
Because we have to. We're going to continue, I guess, basing all of these previews around the idea of heat checks and temperature gauges and thermometers. And
friction,
yeah, all that stuff. Why don't you get us rolling here with all things Mountain West?
Hey, real quick, it'd be great if you could consider subscribing to the YouTube channel down below. It really helps us out. Okay, I'm going to stick right on there and talk about the heat and how hot I believe the Mountain West to be. It's so hot that a new conference is forming around it, sort of.
Well, they're stealing teams from it.
Right, a new conference. I'm saying a new conference is forming with an old name, with a combination of teams from at least two different conferences, maybe three. Everybody's just hot for the Mountain West, Ty. Everybody wants more Mountain West in their lives.
It's the Mountain West Nebula that is forming a new star.
That's exactly right. Okay, so I would immediately text the Mountain West after a first date and make sure that they got home safely. I would text too soon. I would be super excited to plan a picnic with the Mountain West. I get it from an Oregon State, Washington State perspective that geographically it makes sense. I love the coaches in the Mountain West. I love the upside of teams in the Mountain West. I love that there is a clear standard in the Mountain West, a team in the Mountain West where you're like, well, there's them, and then there's a next tier, but nobody's in their tier.
Right.
I like all of that. And I love that it's at altitude, and that weirdly affects teams. Some of the teams are definitely not at altitude, the West teams, and some are at crazy altitude. The concept of the Mountain West, not even just the concept, the realities of the Mountain West get me going in a way that Lorenzo Lamas could appreciate with his flaw finder, even though I can find a ton of flaws.
Sure.
So the question is the Mountain West hot? The answer is yes, of course.
The answer is yes, absolutely. The answer is yes. I guess the question that I have is, especially over the last year and a half, so much of the conversation is centered around Boise State.
Yeah.
And it was obvious going into last season that Boise State was going to be the team to beat. Has that gap narrowed at all in your mind?
No.
Or is it still Boise versus the field?
Okay, so Boise is not exactly what Boise was last season because they had their greatest and most talented offensive player ever.
Sure.
As a program, and there have been some terrific ones. There have been some record-setting ones, some big-time winners, some big-time players that have moved on. Ashton Jeanty is the greatest player to play for Boise State, and that's not a take at all.
No.
So even though Boise's running back stable, their running back room is, I think it's probably the best in the conference even without him, there's a difference there. There's a gravity there to Boise State, which I'm happy to start with Boise. You know, Spencer Danielson, when he lost the interim tag, came in and immediately was excellent for the Broncos. The defense developed guys. They wisely developed their offense around the best running back in the nation. And even though Maddox Madsen was very good against Mountain West teams and a little bit lacking in key moments and in key games, namely against our alma maters in Oregon and Penn State, Boise was a crazy success story last year and does not appear to be slowing down at all this year, mostly because the teams with which they competed to be the best in that conference, namely UNLV, lost their coach and a bunch of key players.
Right.
And they're starting over in a pretty serious way with how many new players that are going to be counted on in Vegas. So Boise, merely by having a returning quarterback, a bunch of key players on defense, coming back to a defense that was a top 25-ish national defense, if not higher at its best, they're just way down the road from everybody else in this conference. So,
yeah, I'm looking at some of Bill C's projections now, and to the point, it looks
and their schedule, by the way, rules. It's not like they're constantly on the road against the best teams on their like the schedule's great.
The Boise projection, just to give some context here, Bill's got them as the 33rd best team in the preseason SP Plus. The next closest is UNLV at 75th.
That's a gulf.
It's a gulf, and based on other projections, he's got them close to 10 wins. He's got them what looks to me to be about a 13, 14-point favorite over UNLV. This is preseason stuff. It's going to change a million times even before we get to the season, I'd assume. But just to kind of give you a sense for where things are at here, it really does look like, per these projections, Boise's way up there and everybody else is sort of scraping and clawing to get even into the next tier.
Correct. It might not even be fair to say there's a next tier, right? If the first tier is clear contender and the next tier is could figure things out to give Boise some problems, I don't know if there's a team that is so obviously in that tier. If you're saying the next, SP Plus projection is in the 70s.
Right.
Usually you would want 40s, 50s or something to be one of those teams that has that kind of upside. So somebody is going to appear. Boise, if Boise is what they look like they're going to be, they will play somebody in the Mountain West Championship game. Somebody has to occupy that other spot. But between UNLV hiring another coach in Dan Mullen, which, by the way, they just had 2 years of their best coach in modern history, if not ever, in Barry Odom, who left for Purdue. San Jose State was interesting in year one of Ken Niumatalolo. Fresno State always has a good amount of talent on its roster, and I think a lot of people are very high on the Matt Entz hire. Like, there's a lot to like about this conference from a pure, this is a pretty deep roster of proven quality coaches. Bronco Mendenhall and Troy Calhoun and Sean Lewis, and what he did at Kent State looks better and better with each passing day.
It really does.
So he's at San Diego State, where he should be able to, build up a roster of intriguing talent. Colorado State quietly had a really nice year last year with Jay Norvell.
I like Jay Norvell. I always have.
Yeah. And so just proven quality, the Mountain West goes deeper than it should. And Bronco Mendenhall, by the way, still there. I really like Jason Eck, who New Mexico hired away from Idaho, who gave Oregon everything they could handle, just like Boise did to start the season last year. So proven quality coaching. Matt Entz won a national championship. Jimmy Rogers, who's playing a Mountain West schedule-ish at Wazoo, even though they're not in the Mountain West. There's just high quality here. So Boise State specifically, if that's where we want to start, or if there's any other big picture topics you want to hit with the Mountain West.
No, I mean, I wanted to go to Boise actually because, and again, we're not trying to make any of these G5s. I don't know if it should be G5 or G6. I'm just going to keep calling it G5. It's muscle memory.
Okay.
I don't know if we are doing a disservice to any of these conferences by zooming out a little bit and talking about playoffs. But I think we have to with Boise because Boise made the playoffs last season. They lost to Penn State. And it would appear, at least based on some of the other research that we've been talking through here, that they're again the favorite to get back to that playoff. So why don't we start there? Does that seem like a fair assessment based on the studying you've done on this team? How are they outside of not having Ashton Jeanty, which is a big deal?
Yeah.
How are they different? What does it feel like to you in 2025?
Receiver, obviously running back is different. Receiver could be a little bit different in terms of who steps up. Linebacker, there's familiar faces. Both lines have a ton of familiar faces. The secondary should be nails. There's not a ton that's different. They do have another playoff caliber team on its schedule like they did last year with Oregon, and that is Notre Dame on the road this year. Yep. And so they'll have a case either by beating Notre Dame or how they look against Notre Dame. If they are locked up with another team not in a power conference, that they will have that on their schedule. So the schedule's fine. It's at Notre Dame. They get UNLV at home, and and Boise has a bye before two of its more intriguing Mountain West road games.
Right.
So schedule-wise, they're in a good place. We saw how they acquitted themselves last year in year one of Spencer Danielson against Oregon and Penn State. It came down to the last seconds against Oregon, and I think it was a 3-point game in the third quarter against Penn State.
They hung with Penn State long enough, I think, to turn in a respectable showing. Penn State asserted itself later, but they were in that game.
So, the difference in Boise State is they're more seasoned. They've been to the top of the sport in that they've been to the college football playoff. The proof of concept is there. And so now it's just, are they locked in? Are they focused? Are they going to dump a dumb second game other than Notre Dame if they do dump that one? And that's on the road, but it's not a guarantee that Notre Dame comes out of that. Is there a moment for Boise where they just it's a sandwich spot, it's a look-ahead spot, it's a letdown spot after somebody big? It's entirely possible, but with the way that Boise weathered that schedule last season, I'd say it's unlikely that Boise is falling to 9-3 this year. Highly unlikely.
Yeah.
So I like Maddox Madsen. I think he's going to be counted on to do more this year than he had to do last year. Even with Ashton Jeanty, it's not like he was popping downfield a ton, which is a little bit disappointing that you couldn't use the gravity of having that backfield to your advantage. But otherwise, he's a year older. He's a year more experienced. There's no reason to believe he won't improve like anybody multi-year starter should. So I think Boise's in a great place. To me, it's a 10-2 floor.
10-2 floor would probably get them in the playoff, because 10-2 means you're losing to Notre Dame and somebody else.
Well, I guess 11-2 at this point, right?
11-2.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like where Boise's at. Is it fair then to assume, with all that is new on the UNLV side, that they are the next team up, or do you think that's a little bit too aggressive?
Okay, so UNLV's schedule is UCLA, they're at Miami of Ohio, they're at Boise, and they're at Colorado State in terms of intriguing games. So it's tough on the road. They're going to count on a ton of power conference transfers in. The big names are Anthony Colandrea from Virginia and Alex Orji from Michigan, neither of whom were good enough to be considered long-term starters at those places. And both places had jobs that were there for the taking. So I think UNLV is going to be interesting. I think they're going to be at times fun. But given that kind of roster turnover, I'm just not there with saying that they're the obvious number two. I really like Dan Mullen. And in terms of proven quality, he may already be the best coach in this conference, given what he did at Mississippi State and Florida.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to look past that. But I don't think they're the obvious number two, and they're not my obvious number two.
Who is your number two? Or who's the more obvious number two?
I think San Jose State.
Really?
I think. I reserve the right to change my mind once, because here's the thing. Fresno always has a high level. I'm just not necessarily there on EJ Warner being a contending type quarterback. As much as I like Matt Entz and maybe even the upside of the Fresno defense, I'm not there with them. And their schedule is tough. So Fresno is at Kansas, Georgia Southern, at Oregon State, at Boise State, and they are at San Jose State. So just in terms of situationally, I like where San Jose sits schedule-wise. Returning the quarterback, Nick Nash is gone, who obviously set records for them at receiver. But I don't know. I think the combination of coach, quarterback, and what they return, I think it's pretty good. They have star power on that defense. They have one of the best linebackers in the conference. I don't know. Maybe I'm just too high on San Jose State and my beloved Spartans, but I like them.
I like the job that Ken Niumatalolo did.
Yeah.
And I remember this time around last year, we talked a lot about what's it going to look like when he's not running the option, when he's sort of going about things a bit of a different way, not at Navy. And I don't think it should come as any great surprise that San Jose State was a very respectable program. They had a good season, and it stands to reason that they would improve upon that this year, provided they've got the pieces in place.
Yeah, they lost. Okay, so at the end of the year, so they beat Oregon State, who was super beat up, but they beat them on the road. They lose to Boise State with relative ease by 21 points. They lose to UNLV. They beat Stanford, which I thought was a nice fight from them. There was no really bad losses. They lost to quality teams. They lost a crazy shootout to Wazoo early. So I just didn't even think they were terribly far away last year. And if the starting point was, I don't know, an average defense, a returning quarterback, and a returning quality coach, and a decent enough schedule, it's a weird year because there's nobody in that gulf, that obvious number 2 gulf, because there's just so much new about this conference. So it's now weird to say a second-year head coach with a returning quarterback and a decent enough looking defense puts them at an advantage over 90% of this conference. But I think here we are.
Yeah, I mean, the other point that I would call out, just with respect to some of these teams that we're discussing here now, Boise State falls into an interesting category this year because they're 13th nationally in terms of returning production.
Mm-hmm.
Being high on that returning production number when you are a good team the year prior feels like it is almost a thing of the past. Just with so much movement, the transfer portal being what it is, returning production, that stat has changed. We've had Bill on the show, Bill Connolly. He's talked about that for a bit now. He's having to rejigger how he calculates it. Seeing Boise State that high up on this list is, I think, even more reason to be excited about this season. To that point, San Jose State is 3rd in the conference with what they have back. A little bit more on defense than offense, but it's a program that is going to have a pretty decent enough nucleus coming back. They're in the top 70 nationally, which I view as any win if you're a G5 school and you're not getting absolutely killed on that count.
Yeah, there's nothing crazy back-to-back on the San Jose State schedule. Now, we'll see. They're going to get destroyed by Texas in week 2. But, I don't know, new coach in Central Michigan at home, Idaho with a new coach, Stanford with a new coach on the road, New Mexico with a new coach, Wyoming with a second-year guy, Utah State with a new coach. This schedule is great. No Boise, no UNLV on San Jose State's schedule. They get Air Force at home. They get Fresno at home. I don't know. I think situationally they're in a great spot if they can stay healthy. So they'd be my number 2 right now.
Boise 1, you're saying San Jose State 2.
Yeah.
UNLV 3, I'm assuming.
I think so. I think that's where Dan Mullen gets the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that jumps out to you when you look at UNLV is the fact that with all of these new players, it probably goes without saying, but none of them have played together before.
Right.
And anytime you've got an experiment like that, we've seen it work. We've also seen it not work.
Yeah. And UNLV's starting point for Dan Mullen is they might have the best running back in the conference, Jaden Thomas.
Right.
So start there. We'll see how the line play is. You and I watched Alex Orji last year, tantalizing talent who doesn't complete a lot of passes.
I mean, he should be a running back. He should be a running back.
He should be something, or an option quarterback, or, and maybe he will be an option quarterback for Dan Mullen. Maybe he looks at him and is like, I can work with this from step 1, day 1, whatever. And we're not going to try to, put him into a position where he's not going to succeed. I like the recruiting from the portal recruiting. I like where UNLV is. And schedule-wise, it's not terrible either. So situationally, UNLV's schedule, even though they're at Boise and at Colorado State, otherwise, I think it's workable. Fresno State and Colorado State are the other teams in whatever that 3rd tier is for me.
One final point on UNLV, and then I want to get to the next tier. I'm really interested to see what it looks like longer term with Dan Mullen at UNLV, because
I don't think it's a long-term hire.
It may not be a long-term hire, and I think that's fair. Whether or not he stays there or ends up somewhere else, the game has changed a lot since Dan Mullen got dragged publicly for not recruiting at all.
Right.
The recruiting game has changed, and you could argue that there is more emphasis now on the transfer portal than there is on high school recruiting. We've seen some schools take that tack.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see how Dan Mullen adjusts, if he adjusts, because if in the portal era he is also not recruiting, this is going to be short-lived regardless of where he goes. He's going to need to step up, and they're going to need to have some infrastructure to recruit the portal.
It's also not clear that infrastructure and resources and cash money is going to be readily available.
Yeah.
At least if you listen to Matt Sluka, right?
Yeah, well, that's it. That's it, man. That's my point.
I mean, beyond that, there have been stories about UNLV and, resources on hand. So, like, is Dan Mullen, who is used to SEC-type infrastructure, going to be long? If he succeeds at UNLV, he will be Barry Odom and gone in 2 years. If it doesn't work, he'll step down. He'll be gone in 2 years.
Fresno and Colorado State, you've got in the next tier. New coach for Fresno is Matt Entz, who I like. I like Matt Entz. Matt Entz was with USC for a couple of years, I guess. Before that, if you track back through his CV, like, he was successful at North Dakota State. And I think you and I had just been waiting to see what kind of gig he was going to get. We knew this was eventually going to be the end game. Fresno is a good spot to land. This has been a program that's been very successful over the years. Obviously had a bit of an odd situation last year with Jeff Tedford stepping away late. They gave it to Tim Skipper for a season on an interim basis, and now it's going to be Matt Entz.
Well, it's also just the hopefully solid ground that Fresno is now on, because you remember it's Jeff Tedford, then Kalen DeBoer, and then Jeff Tedford, and then Jeff Tedford steps down temporarily, and it's just been a back and forth situation, not knowing where this program is heading. Matt Entz, younger guy, has succeeded, seems to have hired well with regard to assistants, hopefully is ingratiating himself and themselves in that region well and in the portal well. Obviously headlined by Corey Foreman, who used to be, may have been the number one overall recruit, didn't work out at USC, a player along the edge. And so maybe that's sort of a second chance for a lot of higher profile guys on the West Coast. Could absolutely see that, especially as, the West Coast evolves in terms of who's playing where.
Right.
So I'm going to give coaching and a little bit of offensive continuity, but Fresno State's ceiling is sort of TBD because whoever's playing on defense, we don't know a ton about. So I'm giving Matt Entz and the success that his defenses have had the benefit of the doubt here that by the end of the season, they could be something interesting. But Fresno, like I mentioned it, at Kansas, Georgia Southern, at Oregon State, at Boise State, at San Jose State. So they're going to have to do a lot on the road if they're going to prove anything in year one. And I guess I'm just not there with EJ Warner.
Yeah, I think EJ Warner,
I kind of have a problem with your hair. It's bothering me.
Let's get the flaw finder out.
Jeez, Lorenzo.
Yeah, I don't know what EJ Warner's hair situation is, so maybe that was the wrong button to hit. But
right,
that was going to be my point of contention. I'm not there with the quarterback spot. They could improve. I think it will improve at some point, but at least in year one under Matt Entz, I don't know. That's not my cup of tea.
Sure. Colorado State's interesting just because I think Jay Norvell's a good coach. Won some at Nevada, obviously brought up a ton of players over to Colorado State. They very quietly won a ton of games last year against a kind of a pathetic schedule.
Yeah. Right.
But really, like, he looked at what he had on this roster and we're just going to kind of play conservative. We're not going to take a lot of chances. We're going to lean on the defense a little bit, and we're going to play smart at the end of games. And it was a good formula. I just don't know. It doesn't seem like they have the needed pop to make a huge move in the conference in this moment, especially on offense.
It's a really interesting schedule, if I don't say so myself. I mean, we talked a little bit about UTSA on the last episode. I think UTSA is going to be really interesting, at least on offense.
And them and Wazoo back-to-back, yeah.
Yeah, they've got UTSA and Wazoo back-to-back in weeks, I guess, 4 and 5, but they open the season on the road at Washington. There are also games on here against Fresno, against UNLV, on the road against Boise State.
Yep.
Close out the year against Air Force at home. Who knows what that's going to look like? So it's an interesting schedule. I think if you're a Colorado State fan, there's a lot on here that is worth watching. But what the team looks like, obviously, is the most important thing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely it is. So, yeah, I think they're going to take another step forward in that they're going to look like a quality team more often. It's just a tougher schedule than where they were last year.
Where are you at with the next team up then? If we're going Fresno, if we're going Colorado State.
Right.
You're going like San Diego State, Wyoming. How do the rest stack up?
Definitely not San Diego State or Wyoming. Probably Air Force. They look stronger to end the year last year. They were crazy young, crazy beat up. I think Troy Calhoun's good. We'll see on the defense, but there's enough in the backfield back and now more experience. They finished the year strong last year, and they've been one of the more consistent programs in the nation in terms of making bowl games, winning 8, 9, 10, or threatening to do so. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt there. Their schedule is, I'm reminding myself here, it's interesting. They've got Navy and UNLV both on the road back-to-back. They have Boise. They have Army and San Jose State on the road back-to-back. And they're at Colorado State. So it's not, as you mentioned, it's not like super duper easy schedule-wise, but I think they're kind of the one who knock. Like when you have to prepare for them, you're preparing for something completely different. And I think that's why they've had so much success in the Mountain West. So I think I'm in on Air Force as a stealth, like bounce back to 8 or so win games. Not quite where they were a couple of years ago.
No.
When the defense was allowing like 3 points a game, at least until the end of the year. But I think they're trending that direction. Yeah. For your consideration on any podcast player, search Solid Verbal, find us and hit follow or subscribe. It's just that easy.
There are a couple teams out west that intrigue me. I'm intrigued by Hawaii. I've read really good stuff about Hawaii.
Okay.
I'm intrigued by Nevada because I think Jeff Choate did a good job in year 1 at Nevada. And Wyoming. I feel like we've talked about Wyoming every year. We like to talk about them, I think, because of the altitude thing. Is there an altitude situation at Wyoming?
I think it's the highest above sea level in FBS football.
Claire, altitude.
So.
I got that on the board. That was the only reason I brought that up.
Of course.
Of those 3 teams, who's of most interest to you?
Probably Hawaii. Just because there were moments last year where it looked like they were breaking through. They had a nice performance from a young quarterback late in the season. And the offense is somewhat intact. They don't run the ball, but like offensive line, I think, is mostly back. Receiver has experience there. Quarterback, as mentioned, back, and the back end of their defense. Whatever that means. Sometimes there's returning production that was just butt last year.
Yeah.
And that's true for a couple of these teams. San Diego State especially. Like, they're returning a bunch of guys on defense, but it wasn't a good defense.
No.
So I think I'm most intrigued by Hawaii just because their schedule's so damn weird, and it's so weird to go to Hawaii or to bring in a team from 6,500 miles away. So Stanford at Arizona, Fresno and Air Force on the road in back-to-back weeks, Colorado State on the road, San Jose State on the road, UNLV on the road. It's just too tough for me to feel great about all that road work for Hawaii, but I don't know if the offense is for real and, you know, they lose a ton out of the portal, like they're going to for the foreseeable future, but I think they can be a headache more often than not. So sure, Hawaii.
Hawaii is not going to play a ton of defense this year either. And
No.
I think the deeper we go into this conference, and this is just kind of uniform across the board at this point when we're talking about G5 conferences.
Mm-hmm.
And even as we get into the power conferences, the deeper you go into this well, you're going to start finding teams that skew out much differently than those at the top with respect to defense versus offense. And I'm not sure what to expect on the defensive side there. But offensively, there are definitely elements of the offense that I'm kind of excited about.
I'd put San Diego State in a similar spot as Hawaii, that they could be a headache, but it's just the defense needs to get so much better.
Do we still believe in Sean Lewis? Because when he took that job, I remember you and I talking about it and saying, oh, yeah, like we kind of like it. It makes sense. It didn't work out at Colorado, but this is a guy with head coaching experience. Like you said, the Kent State work is looking better by the day.
Yeah.
Year 1 didn't really pop at San Diego State. You know what I mean?
No, it didn't. They ran okay sometimes. You know, he played with a lot of tempo when he was at Kent State. I think he was under Dino Babers, I believe, at Syracuse early on, and that was a big thing of his. So, I don't know. I still think recruiting is looking for solid ground. Well, the recruiting efforts at San Diego State are looking for, you know, more consistency, and that could be another program that obviously they've invested in the football program, relatively new stadium now. And just what the future is going to hold in terms of conference and the transfer portal, and is there money behind the scenes? Because, again, if you are a relatively high-profile player looking to transfer back home to the West Coast or from a bigger West Coast school. San Diego State seems like an obvious attraction. It's 1 year in. I'm not ready to sell on Sean Lewis. I think his upside is obvious. This year, it's just, they have some experience along the offensive line and obviously on the defense, but it's finding pop. And you should always, in my opinion, you should always do something really, really well at San Diego State. During the Rocky Long time, it was the year in and year out, 3-3-5, just shutting teams down. If you want to run an air raid, if you want to run an option attack, if you want to run whatever, there are enough decent football players either transferring back home or from Southern California or Arizona, Nevada, whatever, that you should be able to run a successful side of the ball. And so that's what I expect out of Sean Lewis and San Diego State, to be competitive enough and to be savvy enough to find what that side is and how that operates. So I'm bullish on Lewis and San Diego State.
How do you feel about Bronco and Jason Eck, the two new hires in the conference at Utah
take a
State
minute.
and New Mexico?
It's going to take a minute. I like Bronco Mendenhall and Logan. I think Utah State will find players. I think this is a school that has the infrastructure. I saw something like before last year's very bad season with Blake Anderson being let go a little bit before the season, they had made bowls in like 11 of 12 seasons.
Yeah.
So it's a place you can win pretty consistently. And Bronco Mendenhall is perfect to go to a place in Utah that wins pretty consistently. So I feel good about him long term. They're starting over in a lot of different places, a lot of new players coming in. I think it's 41 new players in Logan.
Man.
But Bryson Barnes is back. If you remember the pig farmer who
He's
beat
still
USC
playing?
for Utah, still playing.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah. So they're fine. I think they're hunting for 6, maybe.
Okay.
Same with New Mexico. And Nevada, I think, is sneaky interesting because I like Jeff Choate and they gave some teams some trouble last year. They just got to convert.
No.
You got to win more games. Like, I think the proof that things are working is like competing for a bowl, which is very tough. Nevada's not that program all the time, but Nevada opens the season with Penn State. They're on the road against Fresno, Boise, San Jose State, both at home. Defense needs to get way better. Defense just needs to get, ascend to disappointing. And don't we all, Ty?
Don't we all? And that's a perfect segue for our next
By the way,
conference.
Chubba Purdy starting a quarterback for Nevada.
Really?
Yes.
Good hell.
Yeah. And Jason Eck at New Mexico.
Yeah.
Quietly one of the best offenses in the country last year.
Yeah.
And Jason Beck is now off to Utah, who ran that offense for Bronco Mendenhall.
As is Devin Dampier.
But I like Jason Eck. This is like a 3-year rebuild. He did a great job at Idaho. I think they lost in the quarters of the semis last year in the FCS playoffs. He was like a really good developmental guy for Idaho. So I don't know. I think New Mexico is going to be bad this year. And that's okay because that's where you start. And then you ascend to frisky and then maybe to pretty good. I think it's 3 years.
So the heat's on Boise is what you're telling me. This is a
I think the
long
heat's
way
on
of
Boise.
saying the heat's still on Boise.
Yes.
All right.
There's my Mountain West.
Your top 2 are Boise and San Jose State.
Correct.
All right. I need to take this away and see how I feel about it. But
Do you want me to continue with the Pac-12 since they're sort of Mountain West adjacent?
yeah, why don't you, actually? So we've got 2 teams here. We've got Wazoo and Oregon State.
Playing a home and home, baby.
Home and home. Yep.
I like that, actually. I think that's cool. Whatever. Make it unique and novel, whatever. Washington State loses its head coach, Jake Dickert, to Wake Forest. They hire South Dakota State head coach, Jimmy Rogers, and he brought a bunch of players with him from South Dakota State.
Right.
They were pretty fun last year. You can have a pretty fun team, provided you have a young, interesting offensive coordinator in John Mateer. They have neither, maybe. We'll see on the offensive coordinator front. But they don't, Arbuckle left with Mateer for Oklahoma. Continuity at quarterback, the backup to John Mateer, Zevi Eckhouse. And then a bunch of South Dakota State players, both South Dakota State running backs. Really excellent South Dakota State safeties are going to be manning the defensive backfield. Wazoo's interesting.
I think that makes them really interesting.
Their schedule, and I didn't write down Washington State's schedule because the entire schedule is interesting to me because they're playing the home and home.
Yeah. And by the way, what you mean by that is they are playing each other twice.
They're playing Oregon State on the road and at home.
Yeah, and it starts in I almost said October.
November.
It starts in November, the 1st of November, and then they close out the season.
Yes, they're bookending.
So that's unique. That is definitely a wrinkle that we haven't seen before.
Washington State, quickly. Idaho, San Diego State, at North Texas, traveling to, I think it's Denton, Washington, at Colorado State, at Ole Miss, at Virginia, Toledo, at Oregon State once, Louisiana Tech coming there, at James Madison, Oregon State again, this time at home.
You know, if they have a good team,
then they're going to be playing in interesting games.
If they have a good team,
yeah,
this is a playoff resume. I'm not saying they're going to be
that
that good.
11-1 against this schedule, sure.
I'm not saying they're that good, but I'm saying if in a world in which they are good, this is a schedule it really runs the gamut. Like they are covering all 4 corners of the country.
Okay.
They're playing some interesting teams, some good teams.
Yeah.
I don't think that conversation is going to happen, but alas.
Yeah. Oregon State, just as a transition here, Cal, Fresno State, both at home, at Texas Tech, at Oregon. So rivalry continues. I think beyond this year, it's in doubt, if not taking a break. Houston, at App State, Wake Forest, Lafayette, America's team, Wazoo, Sam Houston, at Tulsa, at Wazoo.
Wow.
5 of the 6 final games are on the CW, for those of you keeping score at home. Oregon State, a little more continuity. Ponied up from Maalik Murphy via Texas, via Duke. Has a pair of pretty decent, if not pretty good receivers, Darius Clemens and Trent Walker. I like those guys. The big thing that held Oregon State back last year was defense. The offense was okay. Defense got so beat up and was so all over the place in terms of where their roster was. They just fully collapsed at the end of the year.
I'm going to introduce my flaw finder, okay?
Oh, yeah.
That's
Thank you
the
very
flaw
much.
finder right there. I'm
That's
glad you
the
brought
flaw
that
finder.
up. The flaw is the defense.
Trent Bray is taking over the defense. He was, the defensive coordinator for Jonathan Smith before getting that job. So now he's retaking over the defense and serving as head coach, of course. I think they got a ways to go. I don't hate their skilled talent on offense. They're obviously hitting the portal hard, and there's obviously some money behind it if Maalik Murphy is now starting at quarterback there. But it's hard to see them going, I don't know. You look at this schedule, 1, 2, 3. There's probably 4 losses best case scenario.
Yeah.
To me for Oregon State. Just because even not if, they're going to be healthier on defense to start the season. I just think they're going to be thin everywhere because of the unfortunate realities of Oregon State football right now.
No.
You're just going to lose quality. So I think both of these teams are going to be pretty good this year. I think Wazoo is more fascinating because of the let's start a bunch of excellent FCS players.
I love this. I love this so much. We're seeing more
Dynamic.
and more of it.
Yeah.
I love
but
it.
this is it's not just we're dipping in to get this one guy.
No, we're getting the team.
We're doing what Western Kentucky did with, was it Houston Baptist?
Yep.
Bailey Zappi?
Yep.
They're doing that, but
they're doing it again, by the way.
But
I'll
South
get to
Dakota
that.
State was a national championship winning team. They're doing that with the guys on that roster.
I love it.
So a higher threshold than Houston Baptist in terms of success. So I can't wait. Wazoo is going to be fascinating this year.
I love it.
Yeah.
All right.
You talk some Conference USA?
Let's close it out with Conference USA. I'm really interested in talking about Conference USA with you because I have takes on this, man. I do. I went through Conference USA. I started with Liberty because Liberty is we talk about all of these conferences in terms of tiers or trying to organize them based on who's a contender, who's a pretender, talking of in terms of heat in this case.
Yeah.
Liberty is so far above and beyond the other teams in Conference USA. They are dramatically better than 11 other teams in this conference. And I still think significantly better than Western Kentucky, who would be the next closest. It's not even close, in my opinion. So I'm interested in this conversation because, again, not to make this about the playoff, but Liberty's going to be in that playoff conversation provided they have the kind of year I'm expecting.
Okay.
And Liberty, let me go on a bit of a tangent here if I can. All right.
Please, floor is yours.
We have quickly arrived at this point where in college football, there's, realistically speaking, a handful of non-power teams that could make the playoff in any given year. Oftentimes, I think we're going to know who they are up front. We're going to know who they are before anything starts. We're already talking through them here. As it stands right now, Liberty is probably one of those teams, but they have the easiest schedule in the country. Literally 136th in the country. And that's with James Madison
Yes.
on the schedule. I get it. Schedules are set years in advance. I don't know who you blame for it. I don't know if you can blame anybody for it. My hunch is that this wasn't built with the playoff in mind. But it's a bummer because we could find ourselves in a situation here where a team like Liberty, let's just say on a whim, goes 12, 13-0. They're not going to be in that playoff conversation. They're not going to be because of the schedule. And that part sucks. Now, I know they're trying to schedule Virginia Tech and they're trying to beef up the schedule moving forward. I think they're doing what they can to try and be a little bit more in this. But
oh, well.
At some point, I think the conversation has to shift to, should we just join a different conference? Like, even if you were in the MAC, it would be better than this. It really would be. So that side of it, I think, is something we put to the side. I don't know what kind of season we're going to get from Liberty. I can talk through it a little bit here, what some of my expectations are. But if it comes to that point where we're talking through, we're talking through Liberty as a potential playoff participant, I do suspect that schedule is going to be like an albatross around their neck. You just can't shake that. Otherwise, though, look, I'm interested because this is a roster that's both proven and unproven. Far and away, it's the best roster in the conference, I think by a pretty good margin. But there's also a lot that remains pretty uncertain. This is a good team. They just got to find their guys. And I trust that Jamie Chadwell can do that. We've seen him do that before. I just think it's going to take a little bit of an effort to sort through who's who. They brought over Ethan Vasco. He's the transfer that they bring over from Coastal Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Caden Salter, you may recall, transferred out. He's now with Colorado. There is optimism that Ethan Vasco can be sort of like the new Grayson McCall, that he can be the guy that is a better fit for the Jamie Chadwell system. Remember, he inherited Caden Salter.
Right.
I don't know. I wasn't crazy about Ethan Vasco at Coastal Carolina. I don't know if he gave us reason to be crazy, but I'm curious to see how he fits into this new system. Presumably there's some familiarity there with Jamie Chadwell, given his previous stop.
Makes sense.
So that's going to be different. I do think we could see some modifications to the way they run that offense. The cool thing about Jamie Chadwell's offense is that it's a little bit of everything. And so he has proven, I think, pretty adept over the years at adjusting based on the personnel. And we'll see what they've got with Ethan Vasco, if this is a better stop. The other thing that I would add is, more to the point of it being unproven, Jamie Chadwell's calling card has been building these offenses that have a lot of variety, but are built around explosiveness. Some of his best offenses, his best teams, have been ones that are really explosive. A lot of the explosion guys are gone now, dude. They're gone. Quentin Cooley, the running back who had a great career, he's gone. One that is not talked about enough is C.J. Daniels, the receiver, a big play receiver who transferred out to LSU.
Yeah.
How they kind of fill those gaps, how they make those plays explosive again, given the personnel on hand, that's going to be the real big question for me with Liberty this season.
Where did he go now? Miami? Florida? No, Miami.
Right.
C.J. Daniels. Yeah.
LSU.
No, he went to LSU, but now I think he's on to Miami.
On to Miami.
Yeah.
Regardless.
Yes.
Not on Liberty.
No.
And I think that's going to leave a mark for sure in their, again, passing game and how they create some of these big plays. The toughest game on the schedule is James Madison.
By a long shot.
They do play JMU. But otherwise, we're talking about a cavalcade of other schools here in Conference USA, which frankly, outside of Liberty, isn't that tough.
So, Ty, do you know that on their schedule, how many teams were playing FCS football in 2021 on Liberty's schedule? The answer is 6 teams. Maine, Jacksonville State, who, by the way, Jacksonville State was good last year with Rich Rod. Maine, Jacksonville State, James Madison, Delaware, Missouri State, Kennesaw State. We're all playing FCS football in 2021, 4 short years ago.
Yeah, and like I'm not trying to dunk on them. I'm just saying.
No, it's just how this works out with Conference USA, and they lose their teams, so they're looking to the FCS level to add teams. I get it.
You know, it's a fluid situation, and Conference USA is dealing with it the way the rest of us are dealing with it, trying to keep up with all this. And I think they're doing the best they can. They're added 2 new teams, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. Liberty, though, just happens to be the biggest dog or the best team in this conference, and it is at the point now where the schedule is going to start working against them with respect to the postseason. Love it or hate it.
Conference USA is that they themselves are a semi-recent FCS conference given the membership. Yeah,
I think the next best is Western Kentucky. Again, I don't know if it's necessarily close. Western went 8-6 last year. They lost in the conference title game to Jacksonville State 52-12. And then they lost their bowl game to James Madison. I'm interested in Western because something you referenced earlier. Tyson Helton, the coach, is running back the playbook from 2021. He's doing it again. So in 2021, he brought over Zach Kitley, who's obviously moved on to bigger and better things now, has his own team at Florida Atlantic, but has been a very successful coordinator. He now is playing back the same tact with Rick Bowie at Abilene Christian. So Rick Bowie, successful offensive coordinator, Abilene Christian. He has been poached. He is bringing Maverick McIver, their quarterback, up. Are
you just going to go over that name as if Maverick McIver is not a name worth taking a beat about?
It's wonderful. Maverick McIver threw for 3,800 yards last year, almost beat Texas Tech. Remember that game? It was like 52-51, something like that.
Yeah.
He's going to try to do the same thing where he's bringing up the
hockey line change. Yeah.
Very successful, lower level coordinator and his quarterback to see what he gets here. It's going to need to pop. It's going to need to pop because the defense lost its top 12 tacklers from last year. There's only 2 starters back. They're still focused on trying to create turnovers, which they have been very good at doing over the years, but probably weren't good enough at last season. I think the point of intrigue for me with Western Kentucky is because they're attempting the hockey line change again. It has to work because I don't think the defense is going to work.
Right.
So there's pressure here to make this go.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. That always makes it interesting.
Okay. Who else intrigues you here?
Sam Houston. Let's talk about Sam Houston.
Yeah. New coach.
Big time reset. Big time reset.
Yep.
On like 7 different levels for Sam Houston. Sam Houston had a top 50 defense a year ago under Casey Keeler. Now Casey Keeler left. He went up to Temple. We talked about that last episode.
Yeah.
They're bringing in Phil Longo. Phil Longo did not have a great stint at Wisconsin, but he does have some familiarity with this program. He was an offensive coordinator here like a decade ago.
Before I think he went to Ole Miss, I want to say. Yeah.
He's familiar with the program. He's familiar with the area. I don't think it's a bad hire. I am interested, though, because this is an extreme makeover situation.
Okay.
This is a team that was built around defense. Phil Longo is not going to build it around defense. Phil Longo is going to make it about offense. So that's interesting to me. Anytime you attempt any big identity change like that in college football, I mean, we talked about it with Georgia Southern, what Clay Helton's done. It's hard to do.
Did I ever tell you that Phil Longo slid into my DMs all the time?
Phil Longo did?
Yeah.
About what?
I think he was sliding into everybody's DMs, and he would just pass along like motivational graphics for whatever school he was at. I would just get a DM from Phil Longo, and it was just like, get ready to feel the heat.
Who was the other guy that was in our DMs, the coach? Was it Bob Stitt?
That sounds right.
I think Bob Stitt was in our DMs for some point.
You know who is notorious DMer? Gary Patterson. I got a few from him too. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, but everybody did, I think. Continue.
The other thing that he is changing now, and this is more a result, I think, of NIL and the portal and just the mechanics of college football. Sam Houston historically was about 90% players from Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's more like 50%.
Interesting.
More like 50%. There's a little bit more attention on out-of-state kids, JUCOs, kids from elsewhere looking for playing time, that sort of thing. So he's, I think, casting a wider net. I saw an interview where there was some conversation around this, and this is one of those areas where bumping up to FBS has actually helped them a little bit.
I assume so, yeah.
So the other interesting point, and it sucks for Sam Houston, they're currently doing the stadium renovation thing, which means that they're playing their home games 70 miles away from campus.
Oh, where are they playing?
Not to bury the lead too much,
Yeah.
but they are playing their games 70 miles away from campus.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sam Houston Temp Stadium. It's at move their games from Huntsville to Houston while Bowers Stadium is being renovated during the 2025 season. Okay. Shell Energy Stadium.
There you go.
All right.
Jacksonville State. Here's another interesting coaching thing.
That's true. No more Rich Rod.
No more Rich Rod. Jacksonville State wins the conference in resounding fashion. Yeah?
Yes.
What did Jacksonville State do with Rich Rod? What was their MO when it came to running an offense? Did they like to run it or did they like to throw it? Do you remember?
I believe they like to run it a
They
ton.
ran the crap out of the ball. And
Yeah.
They were really good at it. So when it came time to name a successor, Jacksonville State did not go in the direction of keeping that continuity going with an already successful offense.
Which, by the way, is okay.
It's not
I
the
think
end of
it's
the world.
okay.
It's not the end of the world.
You hire the best man for the job. You don't hire the man who can keep whatever the last guy was doing going.
The continuity hires don't always work either.
Yeah.
I just sort of question the idea to hire Charles Kelly, who's a defensive guy.
Yeah.
Um,
Been all over.
They had a really successful program built around offense, a specific style of offense, and Charles Kelly's going to change that. So Charles Kelly, long known as a defensive guy,
Big recruiter.
goes out, hires Clint Trickett as his offensive coordinator. Clint Trickett notably wants to make it more balanced. He wants to throw the ball a little bit more. So it's going to look different. As a result, Jacksonville State, I believe, is 135th in the nation in returning production. They lost a lot. Gavin Wimsatt is going to be that quarterback.
Great.
Don't really like, to be honest
Okay.
with you, but I guess you take what you can get. Whatever.
Yeah.
I think we are due for a significant step back here on the Jacksonville State side.
What is the name of the Sam Miller, Ben Lindbergh book? The only rule is it has to work?
The only rule is it has to work.
That's it.
I don't think this is going to work.
But it may not work. Okay.
It may not work. Why don't we get to our two newcomers, if you're cool with that?
You know this is the portion of the show that we have to dedicate to Delaware. Yes.
A brand new bombshell is entering the villa.
Oh.
We've got two new teams here, Dan.
I'm ready.
We've got Delaware. We've got Missouri State. Delaware's been a successful FCS team. They've really been good at that. They've been a good program for a while. And so there is at least some school of thought out there that they could be the next James Madison. They could step in, seemingly be right at home, and ascend to, when they're eligible, a bowl game before long.
They play at Flacco Field.
Joe
The house
Flacco,
that,
noted blue
that
hen.
Joe Flacco built.
I considered going to Delaware for a moment.
Is that true?
It is, yeah.
How's their comp sci program?
Oh, I don't know. It was the first school I went to visit, and my lasting memory, you can ask Mom H, she was there with me, is the dorms were like shoeboxes.
Did they recruit you? Were they like,
For
we've
what?
identified
For what? What
Just-
would they recruit me to do?
just added value to that campus? Look at this kid. His teachers rave about him.
Yeah.
Played a solid second base.
No.
$1 million smile.
It is $1 million smile,
Okay.
but I was not recruited. If anything, it was for grades, but
Okay.
alas, Delaware's in a good spot here. I'm excited to see what Delaware can do as they move up. I think the most notable thing about this team, and oftentimes you see this when anyone bumps up, line play. What's the offensive line look like? Are they going to be able to stand up to the competition? I think this is a pretty good offensive line that's going to be able to hold its own.
Okay.
So that in and of itself, I think is pretty good. It was a good defense a year ago. I think they'll continue that to some extent this season against this competition. I saw that Bill also tried to convert, there's a bit of voodoo that goes on with trying to figure out how
Right.
would this team have compared to FBS competition last year, given what they did on the FCS level. He says that they're roughly equivalent to the 100th best FBS team based on their SP plus grade. So not the worst, certainly not the best.
By the way, here's your Delaware sidebar. They had the same coach from 1966 to 2001.
Long time.
Tubby Raymond.
Long
Legend.
Time.
Yeah.
Long time. Their first couple games, I think, or I should say a couple games throughout the course of their schedule, they seem to be the favorite right now. So
Okay.
if you look at their over-under, their win total is 5.5. That's why. They're already stacking them up as better than, maybe half the schedule. So we'll see. I'm optimistic about what this transition looks like for them. I'm also optimistic about what it looks like for Missouri State. I mentioned this before, but Bill Connolly, our friend who does these projections, he talked about their offense a little bit in some of his preseason projections. It looks to be maybe one of the better offenses in the conference.
Okay.
They've got a good quarterback, Jacob Clark. He's 6'5", pro-style quarterback, the type of guy that could draw some NFL interest, set passing records, on track to set more records. They're going to need him to perform at a high level because if they're playing in shootouts.
Right.
This is not going to be a team that's driven by defense, but Jacob Clark is worth watching on the Missouri State side simply because he seemingly has a pretty high ceiling. So I'm interested in that. I also, again, look at this team and I say that it looks like they're okay along the lines. These are two teams stepping into FBS play that are going to be able to stack up along the lines. Big on the offensive line. Really big. That's a good thing. That's a really good thing. So we'll see how they stack up as this thing progresses here, but having two new teams added to Conference USA, I think it was needed. I'm sure Liberty wishes that they were better teams that could add to their schedule and their playoff resume, but at least for Delaware and Missouri State, it's a nice little landing spot to get their feet wet.
Head coach Ryan Beard at Missouri State is such a known quantity that his Wikipedia page lists his birth date as either 1988 or 1989.
Great.
So he is either 35 or 36 years old, so a younger coach. And Missouri State opens at USC.
Yep.
Welcome to the big time. Go out to LA.
Love it. Real quick here.
Yes.
UTEP.
Okay.
UTEP's going to the Mountain West next year.
Yes, they are.
So I think there is some hope that maybe they can make a bowl or show out in their final season. I don't think they're going to. They had mass turnover.
Okay.
Malachi Nelson, I think, is the quarterback. In all likelihood, they're not counting that as a sure thing at this point, as has really been the case throughout the course of Malachi Nelson's career.
So former 5-star who had been at USC and then Boise State lost the open QB battle to Maddox Madsen last year.
I just want to see the guy play, Dan.
Yeah.
I'm just genuinely curious to see what he looks like out there.
Well, here's the thing, by the way, with the Conference USA slate. If we think that it's by and large, like Liberty has the easiest schedule in the country, that means somebody's going to win 8 games with absolutely no business to win 8 games.
100%.
And so we just have to determine who that team is.
It could be Delaware, but...
Could be Delaware, could be Missouri State, could be Western Kentucky. If there's a bunch of crazy underwhelming teams on here, somebody's going to go the weakest 8-4 ever.
The other interesting thing about UTEP, really unlucky. In those luck stats, they were terribly unlucky. Turnovers, close games. It just wasn't good for UTEP. So we'll see how they do in their final stint here in Conference USA before they seemingly upgrade to the Mountain West. Kennesaw State, look, Kennesaw is in year 2 now after making the transition up to FBS. They had the big upset last year against Liberty. The coaching change was very controversial. They got rid of Brian Bohannon. He was the only coach in the program's history. They're now going to Jerry Mack, who's a former NFL assistant. I don't hate this hire.
Okay.
I'm actually kind of interested to see what he's able to do with this program because he's somebody with a lot of varied experience at a bunch of different levels. And based on what I've been able to read, has been saying a lot of the right stuff.
Okay.
So I think they're going to lean on their defense. They returned something like 13 of 17 players who had more than 200 snaps, something like that. I'm probably botching it a little bit, but that will be interesting to see if the defense can carry them as they try to transition out of their option offense.
Right.
We got another situation where this is a program that ran one thing. Now they're going to more of an up-tempo spread. What does that look like? Okay. This could be a longer transition if they're trying to get out of that identity.
Well, their starting point is they're on a Liberty win streak, right?
They're on a Liberty win streak, 1-0.
Okay. That's a good starting point.
Louisiana Tech. I'm actually pretty high on Louisiana Tech.
Okay.
Tony Franklin is back as the offensive coordinator. I feel like Louisiana Tech got the short end of the stick a couple times last year. They lost 3 games in overtime. So there's a case to be made that they were better than the record would indicate. I think they've got some promising young talent on offense. I look at a guy like an Evan Bullock at quarterback. Defensively, I think we're always going to have some concerns about the defense. Just that's sort of like the MO in Conference USA. But I think there is reason for optimism here. I remember you and I talked about Louisiana Tech at the start of last season. We disagreed a little bit as to which direction the wind was blowing with respect to that program. Even though they did not go to a bowl, was not a winning. Well, they did go to a bowl. They did not have a winning record. They went to a bowl because of numbers. But I feel like this is a program that is still trending in an okay direction. I'd like to give them another year. See where things go.
Right. Okay. By the way, you can buy, as of 2008, you can buy the Tony Franklin System DVDs for, per this message board, $3,000.
$3,000?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. I haven't seen them on the secondary market since.
Let me close this out real quick.
Yeah.
Middle Tennessee. I got this tidbit from a YouTube channel called the G5 Hive.
Okay.
Which I did my best to speed run when I was studying all these teams. If you've never watched like a dozen YouTube videos at double the speed over your weekend, let me tell you, it's a real hoot.
Yeah.
But these guys did an awesome job, and I want to call them out for doing it. They did an awesome job talking to writers for many of these teams that we're discussing here. I learned a lot just by watching their content. So go and check it out. If they're listening here, I don't know if they listen, but kudos to them. Keep it up.
Yeah.
This was one of the more interesting things that I found. Middle Tennessee, Derek Mason is the coach.
Right.
He wanted to cut money. So what he decided to do was get rid of alternate jerseys and alternate helmets. And in doing so, he was able to free up about $1 million. $1 million that they've then reallocated to NIL opportunities, primarily which are going towards the offensive line.
Okay.
So we don't talk a whole lot about the operational details of budgeting on this show, but I think that's smart. They're going to like the most vanilla possible uniforms so that they can take the money that they are saving and put it back into the actual players on the team.
All right.
I don't hate that. Their
I'm
win
okay
total
with
is 4.5. I don't think it's going to be a great year for the Blue Raiders. But that being said, I like their quarterback. Threw for over 3,000 yards last season. Didn't throw too many interceptions. Did not have a line in front of him at all. Nicholas Vattiato, if I said that correctly, I'm sure I botched it.
Okay.
Interested to see what this looks like another year under Derek Mason. The other name here that I would call out, let me pull up my notes. FIU. I've had this thing for Q1 Jenkins, their quarterback.
Okay.
I liked him a lot last year when we did our preview. Didn't really work out. But I think he's another guy who I'm targeting as an improvement opportunity, somebody who could step up in a really big way. They've also got a new coach, Willie Simmons. He's been at Florida A&M, at Prairie View. He's from Florida. He knows how to recruit South Florida talent. So curious to see what year one looks like under Willie Simmons and if they can get more out of Q1 Jenkins.
Okay.
This program has finished with 3 consecutive 4-8 seasons. So I got to believe that their main point here in 2025 is going to be trying to get back to a bowl. That's just where they're at.
Drive for 6. Yeah.
Very much a drive for 6, Dan. Otherwise, I think the only team I didn't cover was New Mexico State.
Okay.
And New Mexico State took a real step back after Jerry Kill left.
Correct.
So they won 3 games in Tony Sanchez's first year.
Former UNLV coach, yeah.
Former UNLV coach. Now it's a Logan Fife offense, who they brought down from Montana. Speaking of guys still playing, Logan Fife is still playing. He's had a cup of coffee with a bunch of teams. This is just a team that outside of, bringing in a guy like a Logan Fife, they got killed by the transfer portal, which has been the case with a lot of the teams that we discussed here. Got murdered by the transfer portal, and it's going to be another uphill climb for Tony Sanchez.
Okay. Sorry to hear it.
Yeah.
So Liberty.
Okay. I think it's Liberty, yeah.
Thanks for the nuggets.
Not bad, right?
No.
Go and check that out, man. G5 Hive. They did an awesome job. I got to give those guys props.
Done.
I mean, I know what that's like doing that type of content in the middle of the off season, in the middle of the summer, but I think they did a really awesome job. I'll send them an email after this. I'll let them know.
Cool. Sounds good.
All right. So Pac-12, the Conference USA, the America's Conference USA, and of course the Mountain West. Next up is going to be the ACC. So make sure you set your dial for that. Hit follow, hit subscribe so that you don't miss any of our episodes. The plan is to do 3 per power conference, one that's sort of higher level, bigger picture, and then a 2-parter going through all the teams because all these power conferences have too many teams these days.
Correct.
Why don't we leave it there? All right.
Done. Thrilled. I'm going to go figure out when I can next see the Mountain West Conference.
If you are out there, if you heard something that you liked or didn't like or have something to add, solidverbal@gmail.com is always how you can reach out to us. Leave a comment if you're watching on YouTube or listening out on Spotify. Leave a rating or a star review. All that stuff helps. For that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildenbrandt, getting a little raspy here, Dan. A little raspy. We did 2 of these today. I'm Ty Hildenbrandt. Talk to you all soon. Stay solid.
Peace.